A joy on this Friday to speak to James Manyika of the McKinsey Global Institute. We've been talking about their new report on productivity, but over the last years, I have seen only one or two reports as profound as Mr. Manyika's report of December on jobs worldwide, and particularly on jobs in America. James, congratulations on your 150-some pages, Jobs Lost, Jobs Gained. Germany, page 94. Why is Germany different? What do the Germans do that the United States of America needs to do?
Well, they do several things very well. They have vocational training that actually works, so people are better prepared for work. They also have set up a system that allows, that creates incentives for the private sector to invest in human capital. One of the things that's quite striking, Tom, is that if you look at, as important as we say training and education and on-the-job training and learning is important, we have very little by way of incentives to encourage the private sector to invest in that. We've set up all kinds of incentives for investments into capital, into R&D. We have R&D tax credits, et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes to human capital, not very much.
Brad DeLong and Danny Roderick looking at retail manufacturing, clothing manufacturing in America said it was all lip service. We didn't come up with the incentives for the people that got hammered 20 years ago in clothing, this clothing south. How do we change our culture to help people?
Well, one way to change our culture to help people is to actually invest in them. One of the things, there's two things that we don't do as well as the United States. One is the amount that we spend either in the public sector or the private sector in on-the-job training is the lowest among the OECD countries.
Yes.
And it's been declining. Similarly, the amount we spend in helping people who've been dislocated, look what happened to globalization, is also among the lowest in the OECD countries. So we have to invest in people.
Okay, but this is, folks, let's be direct. This is the Lockean individualistic tone of the early 19th century. I guess we've moved on from Thomas Jefferson, and maybe we can wander out to Andrew Jackson with a portrait hanging over Mr. Trump's desk in the Oval Office. How do we get to a more modern ethos from where we're stuck in the 19th century on helping labor be productive labor?
I think a big part of that is realizing just how much work has changed. One of the things that we haven't paid attention to, Tom, which is an important part of changing that culture, is recognizing that, well, there was a time about 100 years ago, even as recently as 30 years ago, when, in fact, the share of the national income that went to wages was actually high. It's been declining. So we need to recognize that that's changed. So a lot of it is that we haven't quite appreciated just how much the economy and the labor markets have actually changed and how work looks different, so recognizing that change is a big part of changing that culture. I've been quite struck in conversations I've had with policymakers, but also with business leaders who haven't quite appreciated those structural changes that have occurred. So I would say that's the big part of the first step.
I mean, James, when you go to Davos, I know you're flying in on the McKinsey helicopter. Mere mortals like me.
I walk there, Tom. They walk me there. They make me walk.
Actually, knowing James Manyika, you're walking from St. Moritz North to Davos over 3 mountain ranges. I take the train sometimes, which, folks, is just a wonderfully pleasant ride, and you see Switzerland manufacturing. We want to do that. How do we create not a little Switzerland, but a big Switzerland in American manufacturing that will actually, at the margin, create jobs?
Well, there's several things that are actually in our favor. One of the things is that we should take advantage of the digital technologies that we now have. We should also take advantage of the fact that we now have an energy revolution. One of the reasons why people typically locate elsewhere in manufacturing, we forget it's not just labor costs, but it's also energy costs. So we should take advantage of that. And the other thing we should do is to invest in the supplier base. If you look at what's happened in manufacturing over the last 25 years, especially in America, is that the small supplier base that feeds into manufacturing, we've mostly gutted that. So the amount of investment that's gone into that has not been great. So those are some of the things we need to do. But a lot of it also comes back to the skills question, Tom, which is our skill profile in manufacturing has not been as great as it needs to be. Again, invest in people.
Well, I want to go to that. I think that's important. The supplier base. Bloomberg surveillance. We're with James Manyika of McKinsey. Brought to you by Eisner-Amper. Congress has passed the most sweeping tax law changes since 1986. Is your company ready? Check out the latest analysis, the latest news from Eisner-Amper at eisneramper.com/tax change. Let me spell that. EISNERAMPER. Eisneramper.com/tax change. With James Manyika, we meet with him, we hope, twice a year, maybe even three, with a wonderful report, productivity. And before that, we're talking about it right now. Jobs lost, jobs gained. What is our supplier base to manufacturing? Describe that.
Well, so think about automotive. We have these second tier and third tier suppliers who provide brakes, they provide electronics, they provide gear shafts, they provide all these little things. They provide the machinery, the metal tools. They even provide some of the engineering services that feed into automotive, for example. So there's a lot of kind of an ecosystem of these small suppliers who feed into manufacturing. This proportion of those has been declining over the last 20 years or so. So that's a little bit of what we need to rebuild. And a lot of that is actually in the heartland.
It's in the heartland, and I'm sorry, it can be policy successful. Why can't we institute policy to create entrepreneurial suppliers coast to coast?
Well, part of it, quite frankly, is we haven't paid attention to it. We've always thought about this as, the big manufacturers, the big suppliers,
exactly.
The big players, right, and not enough of the small base. But however, there's some good news on this, which has been changing. And by the way, manufacturing is actually on the upswing, by the way, in terms of output and growth for the United States. A big part of that is we've finally encouraged foreign direct investment. Look at what's happened, for example, in South Carolina with automotive. And typically when you have smart policy and you bring in what are called greenfield foreign direct investments, where they build facilities, that typically also stimulates a local supply base. So you see this in various parts of the country, in South Carolina and places where we have, for example, aircraft manufacturing. But one of the things that I think we should come back to, Tom, in manufacturing, but even across the economy, it comes back to this jobs question, which is automation and AI and automation is one of the things that's changed what's happened to manufacturing in terms of employment, and is also coming to a sector near you now that we have AI technologies and automation showing up even in white collar work.
Well, we'll have to say that for another time. James Manyika, thank you so much. Solving the Productivity Puzzle, just published, and Jobs Lost and Jobs Gained. And I'm not going to mince words, folks. You can go to the McKinsey Global Institute website. They have a terrific, totally quick read executive summary, and then the wonderful detail and graphic presentation of these different important puzzles. It's a huge, huge public service by the McKinsey Global Institute. I'll tweet all those out when I get a chance here.
Well, thank you, Tom.
James Manyika, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate that. Thanks for listening to the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Subscribe and listen to interviews on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, or whichever podcast platform you prefer. I'm on Twitter at Tom Keene. Before the podcast, you can always catch us worldwide on Bloomberg Radio.